Everybody, we just had a State of the Union, but what's the education State of the Union? You'll hear from us on the other side. And welcome back to another episode of South Star Classroom. For Jubilee and for our boy Omar, that is David and I am Charles. It's us two today, but the team sends their love and they are rocking. They are all over the country doing incredible things, taking time that they need, all that good stuff. But it's always a party when it's DJ Castillo in the house. He had a much hipper DJ name, but it slipped my mind, brother. What was the DJ name?
I had several. I had my name, which was just DJ David Castillo. I had a hip hop name that I used to go by called Audio Intellect, in the mid to late 90s. And then I had another DJ name where I was kind of playing, all kinds of music like hip hop, soul, funk.
Were you in the Bay Area at that time, or were you always down south? Okay, Bay so I was gonna say that last name sounded like you spent a lot of time on Telegraph at Amoeba and Rasputin.
Yeah, a lot, yeah. And the last name was DJ Chango, which is one of the deities of the Odisha, Afro-Cuban religion.
Well, man, DJ Audio Intellect, brother, how are you, man? Tell us something good. What's new?
What's good? Let's see. I don't really think about it. I mean, I think on the personal front, and still kind of related to education. We just wrapped up the second trimester. At my kid's school, right? So we got report cards. And I'll tell you, from the first trimester to the second, his grades overall have improved. A lot's improved. He's shown a lot of growth. I mean, even moving like a D to a C or a C to a B, that takes a lot of work, right? And he kind of did it across the board, and we'll get into it obviously later in the show, but I play an active role in his education and schooling, right? I think that's pretty obvious. And, it took a lot of work. It took a lot of focus, a lot of hard conversations, a lot of arguments, right?
I bet.
But it happened, right? It's not impossible. And so there's that. So you want to recognize that. And then this other cool thing happened last weekend, where and I don't know where he gets it from, maybe from his dad, but he
we get into it with.
No, not that. Come on, man. He's part of a leadership group at his school.
Okay.
And they were able to participate in like an overnight retreat this last weekend up in the mountains of San Diego with a bunch of other students from across the county. A 2-day leadership retreat with activities and all the stuff, and it was very cool. He came back kind of exhausted but energized. And in 2 weeks he goes off for a week-long East Coast trip. They're gonna do Boston. This is like a lot of
that little boy from our presentation.
Man, they're doing
little boy that you could kind of hold.
No, man, he's grown. He's bigger than you now. He is doing the annual 8th grade East Coast trip, which I don't know if kids on the East Coast do a West Coast trip. I don't know, but I know a lot of West Coast. They do like this East Coast, Boston, DC, and New York City for a week, and that's coming up in 2 weeks. So we're looking forward to that. Yeah, man. So there's a lot happening. It's, and we're still looking at high schools, and you just got to pay attention to all this stuff, man. It's you got to keep up with it, So yeah,
That's dope,
that's what's
bro.
happening over here.
That's dope, man. That's dope. For me, it's been a hellish, I don't know, 6 or 7 weeks. You've been part of some of it, but we have in my consulting firm. I don't know if I can call it a firm yet, but I want to call it a firm. But our consulting business, we got about 4 different projects that's happening concurrently. And the funny thing is, I actually you feel me, I planned them to where they did not get busy at the same time, but you know how that goes. So they're all happening right smack dab at the same time. Energy Converters is doing well. We are expanding nationally to a national cohort. We're still going to have our localized cohorts in Oakland and the Stocktons and Indianapolis, stuff like that. But we're also building now a step up national cohort for older young people. So it won't just be for high school kids. It'll be for college kids and those fresh out to build platforms. So taking that on from scratch. And then just push myself to get back into publishing and writing. I'm trying to write something every week. I used to write like 2 or 3 times a week. So the latest thing that I wrote will be discussed today. And that will lead us actually right now into a great transition into what we're discussing. So, David, I don't know. Did you get a chance to watch the latest State of the Union?
I did not watch it live, but I watched it, post the live event.
Well, I'll tell you this. I was a little surprised, to be quite honest with you.
And that's probably the same reason why I didn't watch it live, because I was double booked. I didn't watch it live just because I couldn't stomach it. So that's why I didn't watch it live.
There were a few faux pas from Mr. Biden. I didn't like when he was talking about all the people that's in this country that came. He was like, some of us came in chains, but then he listed off all these other people that came voluntarily. It was a little weird, but I got what he was trying to say. Everybody did not give him that grace. Some people did. It's kind of split in my community. But I will say, outside of that, I was pleasantly surprised at his fire. He was trying to really hit home what they've actually done in his administration. I thought it was interesting. I did not catch the Republican rebuttal. I saw clips of it. I saw it on Saturday Night Live, but from what I saw, it was not too good. But I didn't watch the whole thing, so I don't want to be unfair. But I think in an election,
I'll be unfair. I'll be unfair when we get there. Okay.
Right. And so I think I'm feeling like a lot of the country, like maybe how you are, just about these 2 candidates. Now, I do think that one is clearly better than the other. I mean, if I got to go in the booth right now, I'm voting for Biden. That doesn't mean I'm in love with having to do that either. And apparently, if a Black person says that, we're trying to take down the walls of democracy by saying I'm not too happy about my decision. But I will say this, man. He talked about the state of the country, the State of the Union, and it's an event. It's event television, at least for the time being. So I just said, well, what's the state of education? And I sent you that a few days ago. I just published something about it. I will post it in the there you go in the comments. But what I can give what my state of education is, and you can throw it to me to start or not, but I always give you the right of refusal. If you had to do a state of education, what would be your highlight points?
Oof! Wow. Yeah, I think some of these things work their way into his speech, and I also want to be clear. Like, I think naturally, there were probably a couple of things that he said that may have not been well received by different groups of people. But I think the overall takeaway, I was following it on social media. It's like I can follow this in that kind of way. But overall, it sounds like, and my perception, or my feedback on it, is that it was a very well delivered speech, very clear, very targeted. And so kudos to Biden for that. I don't think a whole lot's changed on the education front. I think the State of the Union in terms of education for Black and brown children, unfortunately, still feels like it's being hijacked by politics, right? And so on the left, what we see is, or I wouldn't even say on the left, but there's a heavy focus right now on like tutoring, right? Supporting kids with tutoring and all these other things, but we're still not addressing the core issue of teaching, right? This is where kids spend most of their time with their teachers, and I'm not bashing teachers. I'm just saying we need to be focusing more on supporting teachers, around curriculum, around science-based, uh, fact-based, approaches to literacy, which is kind of happening now, and not looking at doing all of this dressing around the core issue. So I think that's still there. Um, I also feel like on the other side of the house, or the other side of politics, they're trying to like blow up education, public education, right?
They sure
And
are.
this whole movement for like, quote unquote school choice, which is it feels like it's picking up steam. And so it feels like not a whole lot has changed, and I haven't. It makes me question, like, even the federal government's role in education, right? Like, beyond having a bully
But don't say
pulpit.
that too loud. The people on the right going tell you to join them in
I'm
abolishing it.
I'm just saying, like, if they're going to do something, you got to do something. But it just feels like, I mean, I think the one interesting thing that we probably don't talk about enough, and this is getting into like the weeds, is all of the funding and the way that the funding is changing. To make a long story short, school districts across the country, in terms of federal funding, people are losing federal funding. Especially in different states, they're dealing with it in different ways. But in California, for sure, you see large school districts that are having to do like massive layoffs because of a lot of extra funding that was coming through during COVID. Kind of like relief funds, which are going away. People can't rely on it anymore. And so what we're looking at, in places like San Francisco, more likely in Oakland, in San Diego, and LA, are like major layoffs of people, right? This is not like, it's not a mystery. People knew this money was going to be going away, so you kind of have to like plan for it. And some people didn't plan for it, and those are the districts that are probably more high poverty and are going to have to do like pretty significant, severe, immediate cuts. So all that to say, unfortunately, I don't think a whole lot's changed, Charles.
Well, you and I are on the same page there, buddy, because I wrote in my piece.
I didn't read your piece yet.
Yeah, it's all good. I called it the State of Black Education Union, and but it was the same thing that you just said. Like, I just quickly highlighted because, again, for not just decades, at this point, generations over generations, we've just struggled with certain things. Literacy, just for quick context, it was reported in 2019. 36.9% of Black students nationwide were proficient in 8th grade language arts, meaning reading on an 8th grade level, like everybody. And then in that same U.S. Department of Education, a different study, they talked about numeracy. And in that, we represent, Black people make up only roughly 13% of the country, give or take. We might go up or down a point, half a point, but we represent 26% of all U.S. adults with low levels of numeracy skills. Now, for those that, I have a lot of friends that work in math, and y'all know that I talk about Mr. Brown. Brown was the algebra and geometry teacher, my favorite teacher, just retired last year after like 30 some odd plus years. He's an Oakland legend, but I have to rep for my friends that do math. And this is what numeracy means, so you all know. Numeracy is the ability to access, use, interpret, and communicate mathematical information and ideas in order to engage in and manage the mathematical demands of a range of situations in adult life. Meaning, can you use math to live? Like, do you understand percentages? If it's 25% off on the milk, do you know how to get to that point? Do you know how to like just basically function in this kind of traditional like landscape that we live in, right? So
sure,
the plan that I wanted for my people was just more like, look, oh, and we have a lot of people that's joining us live. Thank you all for joining us live. I'm gonna let you handle the comments, Dave. Thank you for joining us live. And to our BS3 partners and to our Roku family, thank you so much for being here as well. My plan, I call it the AND plan, and that is awareness, navigation, and duty. And again, I wrote this directly to Black people, but I say this in the report. I've just learned that when I try to write for everybody, it just doesn't hit. And when I write to what I know, it's a lot better. And so this will kind of register for everyone. But when we talk about awareness, you got to be aware that if you are a Black student or a guardian of one, there's a high statistical probability that you are probably getting a low value education, just based off the numbers. Because my numeracy is on point. So looking at the numbers, there's a good chance that you got some fighting that you got to do, even if your kid's in a good school. And like things that we've talked about teaching our people to start asking about proficiency and not just grades and understanding that. And like, you got to be aware of this. Go ahead.
And this is where I thought we were going to get to. But just very quickly,
go ahead.
Like with the work that, we've had to do in our home, to work with our teams of teachers and specialists at the schools that, our kid attends, that's all extra stuff, right? That's stuff because I know how to do this stuff, and I've done the work, right? And so I know how to kind of go in and how to get people's attention. I know the right questions to ask. I know how to get things set up so we're getting the right feedback from the school. But again, that's all extra. So when we're talking about, awareness, I think what I also think about is, what is that experience like for families that don't have that capacity, right? Or that know-how, right? And that's my big worry. Obviously, I'm focused on what's happening here in the home with the family first and foremost, but I also think about maybe, and we're talking about it now, what lessons can we share with people?
Oh, well, you know what, my friend, it's actually in there. So you know what I'll do? Because I know this is your first time seeing it. I will go through this kind of breezy, and then we can come back to certain parts and let it breathe. Because what you're talking about is what I wrote about, which was how awareness rolls into navigation and navigational skills, which then rolls into your duty, right? Whether you got these skills or not. So you're controlling this, so you can help me out. So number 2 is people that are financially able. The plurality of people, meaning like large swaths of people. I didn't say majority because majority is 50% plus 1. I don't know for sure, but I know that a good chunk of people that have good money are exercising their right to choice. Now, it might be called something else. It might be buying a home in a good zip code. It might be enrolling in private school. It might be having access to a magnet school. All of these things are different shades of choice. It just usually gets called choice when poor people decide that they want to utilize that stuff, whether it's charter schools or other, whatever the case is, right? I'm not here for the political conversation of it, but this is about awareness. And poor people have been made to feel that they're doing something wrong when they make decisions that may result in them leaving the current school that they're at. We put it on poor people to save school systems as opposed to holding school systems accountable to actually save children. So you need to be aware of that this thing is happening, and those systems should be making you feel guilty if you are poor in this country. But then that goes to number 3. So be aware that regardless of the type of school that you're in, regardless if you're in one of those good private schools, a great charter school, an awesome traditional school, whatever, be aware, like, this is a full contact sport. The same way David opened this up about where his boys' grades started and where his boys' grades are now and what him and his wife had to do in the role that they played to get there. Regardless of the type of school you choose, you gonna have to be involved. And so those are the things that we talk about. See, I told you we get to it, brother.
Yeah.
But that then leads, and I can go on and on. I wrote a whole book for free about it, but go ahead.
I mean, this number 3, you're talking about it being a full. So what full contact means is, like, I'm not rolling up to the school and like tackling people, and nobody should. But what it means is, like, you have to, as a parent, make your presence known. Like, here I am. This is my child, right? And this is like when at the first or second week of school. And open that communication and ask those questions so teachers know that you are paying attention, and that there's some accountability, right? That's really what it is. That's the crux of it. And you have to do it early. Not to say that, like, I'm not pointing my finger towards any like malicious behavior. But teachers obviously get busy, and in a world of finite resources, it's important for parents to make themselves known, to be the squeaky wheel, right? And I'm talking right
Absolutely.
now about parents that have historically been disenfranchised, ignored by the system. Making yourself known to people, showing up electronically, showing up in person, making people understand that, like, you have an expectation of, you hold your child accountable. That's the job of the parent. But you also need, the school needs to hold itself accountable for things that it says it is going to do.
Yo, I will just say this. I think you are spot on. I also think you should write the full contact education parent. I think that breakdown was great, and there's more content for you and in the trainings that you do. We just had a lot of people come into the show, so let me reset it. Right now, David and I are talking about the state of the education union. We are giving our state of the union. So I just went through the first part of that, which is awareness. Awareness, now that you are aware, we are now rolling into navigation, because regardless of how this system is, and the system is always nameless, faceless, soulless. People talk about the system because there's no name behind it. Nobody has to take accountability, quote unquote, for the system. Now that you are more aware, you are still responsible for navigating this system, albeit however broken it may be, right? So one, you have to build a plan, a solid, attainable with time-bound goals in this plan that you want from the system. What do you want from this system? And let's be realistic, because if this thing has never necessarily freed us, if me as a black man, you as a brown man, and what we have dealt with in this country, what our parents have dealt with in this country, and what we've seen from it, maybe there's been an expectation of it that it just will never get to. So what can I realistically expect from this thing, and what can I take from it? Number two is to then build, rebuild, and or reinforce your village. Like, you need to utilize those nonprofits. You need to find wisdom. Find mentors. You need to extract that wisdom from your elders. You need to take advantage. Like, when you're talking about whether you have the skills or not, Dave, there are resources in your town that go empty. For instance, the library. Libraries are under attack. And a lot of people that are attacking them are utilizing the rationale that because ain't nobody using this, and that we can use this space for something else. So use those libraries while we have them. Museums, there's a lot of programs in museums that come with that or whatnot, right? And whatever it is, parks, whatever systems you have in your local area, that needs to become part of your academic journey. It needs to become part of your navigational toolkit. And as you keep in tune with number two, you need to start planning your own field trips. Like, you be on a mission to just quarterback you and your child's education journey. So what does that mean? So you talked about this, David. Like, you've talked about in the past things you and your wife may have done with your kid. You've talked about like having to get involved and like do these things. And listen, I think it's so important to hear from David, because David has started and led schools. He has been in charge of teachers. He has been part and parcel of a system that has not always liked him and that he has not always liked. And yet and still, even he has to deal and do these things for his own child. Like, nobody is exempt. Whether, so let's say you didn't go to college. Let's say you only got a high school education, and you might feel like it's your fault that your kid is not getting what they deserve at these schools. Well, now I'm showing you somebody that has secondary education, postgraduate education, that's led big systems or whatever the case is and been very successful at it, that got to do the same thing you got to do. So I want to just make sure that we talk about that. I just put a highlight of this in this blog because it's a blog, David, but they can go and get the full free book that I go deeper into how to build out that navigational plan. But this is part of navigating, right? Like being a part of that, your kid's school, going up there, being engaged, building relationships. And I might add on to it, but I just wanted to keep it very simple. But now that awareness and that navigation, that rolls into 3. That rolls into duty. So let me just go there. And because once you have that awareness and navigational knowledge, you got a duty to activate the things that you learned. And so what that means is you got to continue to push the system. And I always put system in quotations. And let me tell you why. As long as I've been in education, which is almost 20 years at this point, David, there's always this, everybody blames the system, even leaders of the system. Like the system, it is when something was, ain't it funny?
Yeah, it's like that Spider-Man meme where everyone's like,
you. The system has no face, baby. It ain't got no name. It don't have a soul. So let's put everything on it. But when we get that student that's a rock star, David, that's my student. That I did that. That's my teaching. That's my principal, and that's my superintendent. So, listen, man. And so the reason that I'm saying that, right, is that you need to know that is like, you need to understand that regardless of what that system is, you're going to have to push it. You got to push it to be better. I don't care if David got his kid into the most prestigious private school that serves every single need and detail David may have for his son and David's wife may have for their son. Like, they're still going to require his engagement. It's still going to require him to push. And if you really want equity, not internet equity, not Twitter equity, not that equity that people say so they can get clout on the internet, but true equity where, you know what, I don't want nothing special for my kid. I just want my kid to have a fair shake, and that they were behind because of a system, make sure that they got resources to match that, bring them up to speed on par with everybody else so it can actually be a fair playing ground. You got to push for it. And so you have a duty once you know better. And then 2, when you carry on from that, you need to be intentional. Number 2 is to be intentional with your critiques. What do I mean by that? Because the system is faceless, because it's soulless, you can't just stop spewing this system shit. It can't just be the system. What are you talking about? Who are you talking about specifically? How are they not serving you? Where is it inequitable? You have to name it. Think of it as you're going to the doctor. You have to tell a doctor specifically where it hurts, specifically what your symptoms are, what has happened. If you just go into your doctor and say, my body hurts, they're going to give your ass an aspirin and a lollipop and send you on your way. You have to to get and improve this actual soulless system, you got to start naming specific things that need to change and be different in it. And that was just an introduction, right? The rest of this is just kind of saying, look, I'm never going to attack. You can take it down. I'm never going to attack. I'm not attacking students, teachers, principals, superintendents. It's not an attack on anybody. There are people that get up every day and work very hard to go in and change lives of people. I'm not saying that they don't. I'm not saying it at all. This is not the opportunity for professionals with college degrees to get in their feelings about. This is about the soul and nature of our country, which lives and breathes in our children that are in these schools right now. And right now, we are failing them. They cannot read at the rate in which they need to read. They cannot do numbers at the rate in which they need to do numbers. They are not being built with the critical thinking skills that one should have in order to lead what is essentially a superpower in this world that has foreign entities that do not want it to be a superpower. And so when we talk about the state of our education union, we got to look at some of these real facts, some of this real data, and we have to take accountability and responsibility for the role that we can play to change it. It is no longer enough. It never was enough, but let's just call it out. To sit back and just point the finger and say, that system sucks, this is wrong, that's wrong, without actually contributing, it's a problem that will not solve itself. And the system is meant to sustain itself, not to sustain your child. I'm sorry. That's why systems survive, but we have kids that drop out every single year and nothing happens to said system. 2, if you think with all the evidence, all the knowledge, all the data, all the facts about where our kids are, if you think that golden education is solely going to come from inside that school building, then you are sorely mistaken. And you are almost welcoming in the heartbreak that will come from that level of delusion. We can't keep doing that. I can't keep getting mad at the public school around the corner that ain't got the books, that all these things that y'all say the system is bad at. Like, so why do I keep putting my hopes and dreams that they're gonna teach my kid proper Black history? Why would David think that they're gonna tell the story of his Mexican ancestors that used to own the land that he lives in right now? Why does he think that that's going to be delivered to his kid with nuance
right now
and integrity? He
and
doesn't.
respect.
He doesn't. So the state of our union is in flux. The state of our union has an issue, and I don't want to be your leader. I got problems just like you got. I am not perfect. You do not have to be perfect to get in this game. You do not have to be squeaky clean the way that everybody lies on the internet that they are angels. All right. Like, you need the wisdom of your full village. And that includes the people that your village may have cast aside. That includes the people that may not be heard. That includes your elders that may not have that education, that educational acumen that you respect, but they can build a house from scratch. Because I know old Black people, old Asian people, old Mexican people, all these people, old white people, that they granddaddies and they great-great-granddaddies and grandmamas knew how to build houses from nothing. Like, so, you know what I'm saying? I don't have that skill set.
Yeah.
You know, I think I might be the generation right under me, might be the last generation where the fathers had the old beater car and would teach their kid how to get under that hood and do that. You can't do it no more. It's all computers. So that's my rant and what I was kind of covering in my State of the Union. You got any other thoughts before I go to our sponsor?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's a lot of talk these days about the death of the public school system, right? You can see it. It's out there. There are tremendous attacks on public education, and we know where that's coming from. And I'm not just talking about people that like want to like pop up and start a charter school. I'm talking about a much more like national organized campaign, right? Hashtag Moms for Liberty. But I will say, like, and so going back to what you were saying, like, yes, I have, learned particular things based on my my work experience in the school system and my experience of being a student when I was younger. So I have that ability to be able to support support my son. I will also say, and I'm not sure if it was transparent, but we are 100% committed to public education in this home, right? We've never attended private school. If it came up, maybe, but like we always figure out a way to make public schooling work, whether that be public charter school or public district school.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to be clear on that too, because I'm also, I'm not one that, is here to bash on I will criticize all night and day,
Right.
and critique, as we're doing now, our systems, because I know that they can and they should change. But I also believe in public schooling, and this whole new kind of generation that has quickly propped itself up around school choice that we're seeing now, is essentially an anti-government movement, and I don't associate myself with that.
Yeah, and I don't either. And I think, and listen, man, well, I have a few thoughts. But before I get into those thoughts, we have a sponsor, and I'd like to thank our sponsor at McDonald's and their foray into anime. And also, one of the kings of anime has passed away. So I think that this actual commercial might even mean a little bit more to that anime community. We'll see you on the other side. Stay with us.
Today's episode of BS3 Network is brought to you by McDonald's. McDonald's is going to McDonald's and creating a universe for longtime fans of both McDonald's and anime. I love sauce on my McNuggets and can't wait to try the savory chili McDonald's sauce. It's savory, chili, and bold. For decades, across various episodes and genres, McDonald's has shown up in the anime world and most commonly called McDonald's. McDonald's will be bringing the McDonald's world to life with episodic shorts and manga comics. For a limited time, anime fans will have the opportunity to experience their favorite fictional restaurant. You have until March 25th to try the new savory chili McDonald's sauce with your 10-piece chicken nuggets.
Yes, man. So thank you to our sponsor, and make sure I do this correctly. Akira Toriyama, he created Dragon Ball Z and has influenced culture, not just in the anime world, but throughout the United States, throughout the world, a bunch of other places. So I saw that was a huge blow for a lot of people, and I think that the fact that this anime partnership with McDonald's is interesting. It came at an interesting time. I hope that he gets his flowers. I don't know how big of an anime person you are, but I could not get through my feed without. I didn't know I had as many friends of mine that were anime fans. So that's for them.
There you go.
So back to what we were discussing, man. Yeah, man. That was my kind of just quick foray into the state of our education union. And here's the thing, I didn't list everything. I didn't make it super exhaustive because one, people tend to not be able to hold more than 3 thoughts or ideas in any given sitting, and then 2, like it's just a lot to overcome and succumb. But if you could just start, the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time, man. So like just start with thinking about your role in this. Start by thinking about what it is that you're trying to get, or the changes that you're trying to make, or what that looks like. Because again, it's just no longer going to be acceptable or okay just to just be like, well, that's their problem, or they need to fix that. Like if it's your kid or your investment, or you as a student, you need to be at the forefront and be a full contact sport player in your education and academic journey, or your families. That's my thought on it, and people can feel how they want to feel about it.
Mm-hmm. So is the question about like what we should be doing as individual like parents, or what we're doing?
Well, I think for me that was just where I was coming from as far as like what I felt the issues that the current state of the union was, education union, and just my thoughts. Now you might have some, double click on those same ones, and you might have some other ones that need to be brought up. But like, what are some things that?
So I think one pot, and I'll keep this because I think this is really important. So not everything that came out of the pandemic was, or the the switch to remote learning and the school shutdowns was. There are a couple of things that we learned and that we changed behaviors on during that time that I feel we should continue to talk about. And so if you have children and if they attend public or private school, you get report cards, right? Mm-hmm. And report cards are based on assignments, tests, assessments, behavior, different participation, different types of things. There's a whole other show we could go into focusing on like what actually goes into grades, right? We're not going to do that right now, right. But that's existed and that will continue to exist. Grades are somewhat, a subjective thing, right? It's based on like teacher interpretation, all kinds of factors, right? So it's not quite an exact science. The one good thing that I feel that's come out of the pandemic is the rise of different types of like reading or literacy assessments and math assessments. So just focusing on like the 2 core areas where, I guess I'll drop some name brands, but like things like NWEA, mm-hmm. things like iReady, right? These are like name brand assessments, and there are more that students are taking now in numbers that we've never seen before, because I think school systems were like desperate to figure out ways to assess learning, right? When kids are mm-hmm. not in school. And many school systems have continued to adopt and use these practices, right? Which I think is a very good and a positive thing. So if you're a parent, in addition to like looking at progress reports and report cards, you should also be making sure that you're asking for any kind of reports mm-hmm. that are being generated by the different other assessment or testing systems, because they all generate some kind of parent facing parent-friendly report that generally comes in multiple languages, right? And they have tutorial videos and FAQs to explain to you. So you can look at a report card, and if your student's getting A's and B's and some C's, and then they take this assessment for reading or for math, and they're like 2 or 3 levels below their current grade, that's a disconnect, right? And so that should like raise the alarm bell for you to be able to like ask questions to your child's teachers about what's going on. Like, why is there a disconnect, right?
Right.
And so I think the data that's being presented, the information that's being presented from these different platforms, I think is really important and really critical. And if you're a parent, it can be an easy way for you to like enter into that dialogue. Like, hey, I thought my student was an A. I thought Charles was an A student, but his assessment results are showing that he's like two or three grade levels behind. What's going on, right?
Right. I agree, and I think that also, in addition to that, right, it's like, so one, it is basically what I'm hearing you say is the ignorance that we may have about how this stuff works, it can't be the reason for us not making sure that we are in the game. Ask questions, right. Get on these people's nerves, right? Like they should be able to explain it to you. Explain to me how this kid got an A+ in your class, but it's not on this reading level. Or wait a second, I asked you what my kid's reading level is and you don't know. How much time do you need to know? Like how are we teaching in an effective way if you don't know what level this kid is on as far as literacy is concerned? If you don't know what the numeracy level of this kid is, how do we know? How are we even making plans to do what we need to do, right? And we should not leave all that up. That shouldn't just solely be the responsibility of the math lead in the building or the English lead in the building or one person, right? Like that person's probably in charge of 3 to 6 or 7 teachers. So I just think that, like, I hear what you're saying, and I just fully agree on it. I think the other thing is there's a turn in education, and I think in this education turn, like there's a turn in technology regarding education, right? So you got these new technologies that are coming up, that are here, that are like in this joint. We got to get in the game. My homie Sharif, big brother friend, all that good stuff. I think he just wrote a piece about AI and tech and education. I know we've talked about it on this show a lot as well. We have to get in that game. If you're waiting for Apple to do it, if you're waiting for Facebook to do it, if you're waiting for Google to do it, it's not going to happen. And I mean, not to the level of fidelity let's just be honest. If they tried to do it, we would probably be critical of them not having the right people do it. I think the other thing too is I'm sure somebody said when Malcolm X was alive, or Huey P. Newton was alive, or when Harriet Tubman was alive, or when Dolores Huerta was younger and running around and really active, or Cesar Chavez was young and active. I'm sure somebody said, man, what if everybody could learn from these people? What if we could take the lessons that these people are teaching and just mass spread it? Because we know we don't have the technology now. That TVs are not going to do it. The newspaper in Harriet Tubman's time is not going to go out to everybody. Well, now you do have social media, and we use social media for a lot of clown shit. We actually have the technology now to build the history curriculum, to build the ethnic studies. Listen to what I'm saying. You don't need permission from districts or states to actually gather and cultivate ethnic studies education or historical education. You can just do it. You can just build it. You can do these lessons at home. This compilation can be utilized in today's technology. I'm just saying, man, I'm not trying to, there's no blaming of the victim here. I don't see us as that. I don't see us as that. I see us as powerful people. And I'm saying this as somebody who went to 11 schools, whose parents was dope fiends until they wasn't, in and out of jail until they wasn't, who made a bunch of mistakes. I had to fumble through this education system. And even though my parents went through what they went through, man, they not a victim of this thing, man. Like, it is what it is. Like, now that we know better, how do we do better? We have come
Right.
in and built hip hop. We have come in and built the arts. We have defined the food scene, whether you black or you brown or you Asian, like culture has seeped into everything. You know what I'm saying? We pass down certain lessons. There are certain lessons that you've gotten passed down in your house. There's certain things I got in my house. We have to cultivate that, and shout out to organizations like Reconstruction.us, led by the great, talented, and beautiful Kai Henderson, right? Because that's what she's trying to do. I think there should be a brown version of that. I think there should be an Asian version of that. I think there should be like a Settlers of America version of that. I think there should be like, listen, man, there's just the internet is so big and there's so much room. We got to utilize these things to actually help ourselves out instead of just using it to only critique. And those are my thoughts. That's my hot take.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I want to look at this because I understand what you're saying, and I agree. I think education begins and ends in the home, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when we talk about access to higher education in particular, right? And higher education, we know, can lead to access to opportunities of influence. And when we talk about people of color, we talk about black students, brown students. Let's look at this thing here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this is
inflation.
This is like this is even pre-pandemic, right? What this says for folks that are watching, and if you're watching, thank you for being here. Hit the like, make sure to share our stream on whatever platform you're watching on. This shows a general correlation of SATs, and I'm not an advocate for the SAT, but I will say there's something off here, right? When you see a correlation between SAT and graduation rates,
right?
In and around the late 2000s, with the dismantling of No Child Left Behind, we start to see a gap between with a rising graduation rate and an overall decrease in the SAT score, right? Which is a standardized test, right? You can say that it's a not a fair test. It's a culturally biased test. You can say all those things, but still, this is what it shows. And the SAT historically has been used to in college admissions, and it kind of a lot of colleges pushed back on it, and now we're seeing colleges kind of pull it back in. We're seeing that right now. Right. And I know you're seeing that, Charles.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think this, again, this is like an interesting thing. We're talking about, the state of education in the United States, and, what's actually under the trunk, what's actually happening because this gap is alarming, right? And these gaps, if you look at these gaps between graduation rates and SAT scores, for Black and brown students, they're probably, we know that they're going to be way more pronounced, right? And I think this is the conversation that we need to be having nationally, not just on the Democrat side, but on the Republican side. However, people are going to choose to talk about what they want to talk about. So,
I think, listen, man, I think that we got to have a real conversation. And I think that I understand the people and how people feel about assessments, and they feel that the assessments are like biased, right? Like, and I get that. I actually don't have a beef with you having that beef. I will join you. What I would say is that we need some measures that are actually measuring, some measures that are measuring.
Yes,
we need that. We need to kind of see if where a young person is supposed to be in this country on a basic level as far as reading and numeracy is concerned. We have to have some type of litmus. And so, I think that we can build better assessments. I think that people are smart enough to build, these assessments that take into account and solve for some of those other things. And at the same time, those numbers that you just showed, that chasm is too big to just be that. It's too big to just be, well, those assessments are not, they're not culturally relevant or this, that, and the third. Like, well,
Right,
look,
right.
some of these math problems like don't have a narrative behind it. It's just the process of doing this problem, right? And so we need to figure that out. And here's the last thing I would say. I think that I've been part of a district. I've been at the top level of district, like right under a superintendent. I have no desire to be a superintendent, people, for the record. And I would watch, and I respect my boss because we never hid behind data. Data is what made us strong. It's what made us honest. It's what it drove us to be able to do the job that was needed to be done, even if that meant that some adults would be pissed off in the process. Teachers, school leaders, I learned this actually as a social worker. I used to, David, when I was a social worker, my team would get a little mad at me because we do all these reports. We do our own assessments, right? We'll have the initial plan, if it's a reunification plan, or if it's a kid with a kiddo with behaviors, maybe they're on the spectrum or whatever. I would show them my plan. I would turn the document around. This is before everybody's carrying laptops. I would have out the paper and we would go through it together. Here's how we assessed you. Here's what we said. Here are the hurdles if this reunification needs to happen that you need to get through. And here's what people are worried about, right? And what it did is it might have been hard to hear for those clients initially, but it allowed us to actually build a bond and a plan and kind of have something that we could go back to and be like, we about to prove this all wrong. If you got a classroom that you lead and the numbers are abysmal, use it as a reflectory point and use it to activate yourself, your youth, and their parents, and hell, even their community, right? Because those are indicators. And for people that don't like statistics, them statistics have done pretty well at predicting who's going to jail, who's going to be poor, where are people going to live, what the economic structures are going to be, and how they're going to shift and how they're going to move. And those forecasts have been pretty strong. So are we going to see that there is a flood warning coming? There is a hurricane coming from these numbers. Are we going to take heed, or are we going to stay there and try to just be like, I don't think the numbers know what they're talking about? And again, I have no beef with changing this stuff up. But again, we got facts that's hitting us in the face. And I think we got to do something about it.
Yeah. I mean, so going back to the State of the Union, right? Even, without anything having to do with education. And I think I said this earlier in the show, everything but everything is so highly politicized right now, right? In this moment. And what I see, we're talking about things that need to be changing within the education system, are, very loud, minority voices, meaning like a smaller group of very well-funded white people that are pushing a particular agenda around public education, right, in this country today in 2024. Mainly because curriculum, certain types of curriculum that may or may not exist, right? And there's a selective outrage about this right now. But what I haven't seen and what you haven't seen is a selective outrage or an indictment of the system around its lack of ability to educate, young Black and brown children. You're talking about numeracy. That's great. I appreciate that. I'm talking about literacy. Like, if you can't read the math book, you're not going to learn numeracy, right?
Right.
So I'm waiting for the moment where we can see like the outrage around the literacy crisis that we know that we have in this country. So until then, I'll believe all this other stuff is essentially, is fake, right? It's contrived. It's going to come and it's going to go. And then the second point has eluded me, so it'll come back.
Well, I mean, look, I agree with you, man. And I think as I go into my final thoughts on this, and
I got it. It's back. It's back. So, and this is the other thing around, like in this moment, in this like political moment that we're living in around selective outrage, we're seeing all of these stories right now about immigration, right? This is tied to the State of the Union. Immigration is a big issue. It's a big topic right now, and it's impacting education as young people are immigrating to the U.S. and moving into public schools. That's happening, and that's definitely a challenge. But what I'm talking about is the scapegoating that's happening. Where we have people coming over the border. People always have come over the border. White people came over a border at some point in time. And I saw a story today about, and it was insane. It was like, they're taking video and shots of the Kensington neighborhood in Philadelphia, which everybody knows. It's like a lot of drug use. It's kind of always been like that. And not to discount it, but to say that it's bad, but to blame it on, immigration, right? And so my question there is, if you look back and you go back, what would it be, 30 years now, Charles? Like, where was all the outrage around the crack epidemic? Yeah. Exactly, right? And so it's like this selective outrage issue where people are just like, oh my God, look at all these poor people. And that are and it's sad because fentanyl is a major issue. It's a real thing. People are dying from it. They're suffering from it. But where was the outrage when crack was moving through the Black and brown communities 30 years ago in this country? There was none.
I mean, not only was there no compassion, it was the opposite, right? It was the criminalization.
Exactly, right.
Parents was in and out of jail my entire early life, sub 11, right? Like, I think the last time when I had a parent in jail, I was possibly 11 or 12. And that was my reality.
So using that like kind of same thinking, this is how I think about the different ways that education pops into the conversation. Right, it's always politicized, right?
Yeah.
Who's talking about what issues, and what issues are people not talking about? So I wanted to put that out.
I'm gonna give you the last final word, man. I'll get mine out.
That's it. I'm done.
Oh, you're done?
That was
okay.
That was my last thing.
I'll go into mine, man. Listen, ladies, gentlemen, my fellow citizens, our state of education union is not strong. It is in flux. It might be strong for a few individuals. That is not actually probably statistically significant at this point, but I think that there has to be a different approach, and the politicizing of it, the finger pointing of it, the posturing around it with no real action to back it up, I think is useless. Actually, it's not useless. I think it's counterproductive. I think it harms us and hurts us more. It's a cancer that we're not treating, and it's spreading. And it's about to get to our brains. And I think that we have to really, really we got to do something about it, man. And we just can't sit around on it. Like you got to try, and you got to have a plan. Again, you just, when you know better, you got to do better. And this is not shaming or anything like that. None of the new words that get thrown on X/Twitter all day. This is not gaslighting. This is not shaming. This is not othering. This is none of that. This will impact all of us. This will impact our union. This will impact our country. And this will impact you, whether you are a staunch Republican or a lifelong Democrat. How we are educating this next generation and how we continue to educate ourselves will come back. We will reap what we are sowing. Like, if you plant bad seeds, you get bad crop. And so, there's something that we all have to take accountability and responsibility, because we will never, ever win against the nameless, faceless, and soulless system. That can't nobody go visit the system. The system don't have a home address. It don't have a phone number. It don't have an IG that you can tag. It ain't got none of that. Cat Williams can't go on Shannon Sharp and call it out. It's not a thing. It's made up of people, individuals, you and me, that's in it. And as the great Dr. Howard Fuller would say, and David Castillo has reiterated on this show, if it wasn't built by God himself, it can be changed and altered. For Jubilee Ransom, for Omar Yanar, for David, DJ David Castillo, and all his many monikers. I am Charles Cole. Thank you for joining us for another episode of South Star Classroom, and see us next week. Same bat time, same bat station. Peace.